Hello. Okay, so I am going to take a moment and cover those questions that you guys had from the discussion board. I thought it would be a lot easier to do this way. All right, so I literally just copied and pasted them one by one. Uh, one of my groups did an amazing job. I got some really good questions, and I did get a lot of repeats. So hopefully I will be able to cover all of them for you. I will go in a row, one at a time. Someone asked me about water-soluble vitamins and wants to know whether the water-soluble vitamins, since we pass them out so often, what does this mean for our bodies? So when you're talking about water-soluble vitamins, that's exactly what they are. They get into your body, they are absorbed. Some of them are absorbed, and if you have an excess of them, they actually just flush out with your urine. So what this means is that the water-soluble vitamins, like for vitamin C, for example, up to a point, you can take a ton of vitamin C and it will flush right out through your urine. What it means is that it's something that you are going to need to replace on a fairly regular basis. But this actually goes for all of the vitamins. You can store a lot of those lipid-soluble A, D, E, and K, and those tend to store a little bit longer because they store in your adipose tissue. But yeah, it's if you hydrate a lot more than someone else, as long as you're not overdoing it, you are still in general going to absorb the same amount of vitamins. Your body takes what it needs and gets rid of the rest. Okay, the next question, number 2, is about osmosis. And this person wanted to know if the isotonic, hypotonic, and hypertonic solutions are at random, and that is why we measure tonicity. No, they are not random at all. It is determined by the amount of an electrolyte or an ion that is in a particular part of your body. So for example, if you're dehydrated, what that dehydration actually means is that your cell has shriveled, because what has happened is you've got a lot more sodium on the outside of the cell than you do on the inside. And osmosis, where this word plays a role in it, is when you're talking about osmosis, what you're really talking about is the movement of water through a semi-permeable membrane, and in our case, that's a cell wall. So it is absolutely not random, but we measure tonicity so that we can tell the level of hydration when we're talking about body cells anyway. You can talk about the level of hydration, the level of certain ions that are in the blood versus inside the cells, and that's really the whole purpose of that. All right, I got a ton of questions about caffeine, which is great because we all get caffeine. So they're kind of interspersed, so bear with me. I'm going to cover them in order as they came up in the discussion board. They asked about caffeine being water-soluble and fat-soluble. Which components specifically contain caffeine that makes it both? That we are not going to get into that in here. Really keep in mind what we talked about when we discussed caffeine, that it does basically pass straight on through to your brain, that it does absolutely, it's kind of a psychotropic, right? So it can affect your brain almost immediately. But that's one of the things that makes it so addictive, and your body does start to rely on it, like it will start to rely on a certain amount of anything you really put into it, but some of the most common addictions are things that give you almost an immediate effect. Nicotine is another one that does it. But when it comes to the details of which components are water soluble versus fat soluble, that is a biochemistry course that I am not going to worry you with. All right, energy drinks not regulated by the FDA, and why is it not regulated? Okay, so the next part of the question is about its importance. I absolutely think it should be regulated to protect consumers, but the FDA it's not considered a food. If it doesn't have lipid, protein, or carbohydrate in it, or under a particular amount, right? So in some cases, I had someone else mention 5-Hour Energy has 0.9% protein. There is a certain percentage of protein that is actually considered acceptable before it hits the category of food. It's very, very low percentage, but there is a number. So in order for the FDA to not just have this overarching need to control every little thing, they have very strict definitions on what is considered a food. So their definition is based on those 3 macronutrients. If it's not in there, it's a supplement, and the FDA does not regulate supplements. Do I think they should? Yeah, absolutely I do. Do I think that we have enough manpower or that the FDA has the reach to do it? Probably not at this time. If you think about how many supplements are out there, one even, a fairly staffed department would still struggle to be able to keep up with these things. So they had to make a determination on where, the most importance is. And the problem is these companies, they absolutely know that. So when they formulate these products, they make sure that they're formulating them in a way that they don't have to deal with all of the red tape of the FDA. So in short, do I think it should be? Do I think it's reasonable to think that they will be? Not at this time. And it's only food if it's got those 3 macronutrients in it at a certain level. All right, slide 24, it says, I talk about the fact that gluten poses no threat to a person who is allergic. I think that what this person meant to say is it's no threat to a person who isn't allergic. If you have an allergy or if you have celiac disease, yeah, it's absolutely a threat. Is there something that a person who is gluten-free should be eating more of? A natural, well-balanced diet. Fortunately, gluten is not, gluten's a protein, right? So most people think it's a carbohydrate because of where it comes from. But generally, people who can't have gluten in their diets have got enough sources of other sources of protein that it's not a problem. But if you eat a high carbohydrate diet, whether you're gluten-free or you're not gluten-free, because rice doesn't have gluten, but it's a carbohydrate. Potatoes don't have gluten, but it's a carbohydrate. So whether you are gluten-free or not, protein is probably the most important thing you can possibly get into your diet. Carbohydrates that come from things that carry gluten are kind of at the bottom anyway. So there are lots of options. Let's see. Energy drinks. Somebody said when I was younger, people around them would say that energy drinks are too dangerous for children to drink them. The main reason is because the levels of caffeine are ridiculous in that very small little energy shot or even in the can that you get. That is the biggest concern. Also, the vitamins and minerals that they put into energy drinks, I believe, are formulated based on adult requirements. So that may play a role in it as well. But my understanding is that caffeine is the big problem. The last thing we need to do is be giving children adult doses of caffeine and getting them hooked on something like that. All right, next question 7. Energy drinks claim to increase energy levels, but for me, my heart just starts to beat really fast and I don't get any energy. Why is that? Oh, you're definitely using energy. You've upped your metabolism. You have increased your blood pressure, so you are using more energy. If you are very acclimated to caffeine, or you are one of those people that is not very sensitive to caffeine, you're not going to feel the same as someone who is extremely sensitive to caffeine or someone who is addicted and already has a lot of caffeine. However, when your heart is beating really, really fast and your blood pressure is increased, try and go to sleep. It's a really difficult thing to do. So in a way, it does sort of do what it claims. even if it's not the healthiest way, and even if it's only for a very short period of time. Okay, on slide 67, let me check and make sure my camera's doing its job. It seems to be. Okay, on slide 67, it says that caffeine works to generate more energy, but when I drink coffee or soda, I feel less. Is this because there's little caffeine in what I'm drinking, or does it have a different effect on people? So let me answer that part first. Depending on what's in your diet, some things have got a lot less caffeine than others. Most people don't realize that the chocolate, for example, has caffeine in it. But I'd imagine, without looking, that most American chocolate, because it is so low in actual cocoa, you get more from a soda or from a cup of coffee than you probably would from American milk chocolate. The rest of the world, it's a different story. Americans like this really sugary, milky chocolate, but the rest of the world tends to not prefer the high sugar content that we have, but that's just kind of American diet, right? So like I said, some people do seem to be more sensitive than others. I can't really give you a background on that, but I've seen the effect. Does it have to do with a person's weight, or is it more the amount of caffeine intake? Both. It seems to me that a much larger person would tend to need more caffeine. It may not be like a huge amount. It may not be a hugely significant amount. But overall, the caffeine intake is the most important factor in this. It's scary, there are actually products that you can get online. Don't do this, by the way. Don't say, hey, my professor said. There are products that you can get online that are powdered caffeine, that you can literally just add caffeine to anything, and they are deadly, and it doesn't take much. Blows my mind that it is available and so easily at that. But for people who are really addicted to caffeine and you keep needing to add more and more caffeine just to get that same effect, that's kind of when they move over into this. It's sort of like coffee is like a gateway drug for some people when it comes to caffeine, because they just need more and more to get the same effect. And it's highly addictive. One of my best friends went to the hospital in undergrad because coffee wasn't cutting it anymore, so she started chewing coffee grounds. Don't do that. Go to bed. It is a heck of a lot better for you to get caught up on your sleep and function fine on minimal caffeine. Don't put yourself in the hospital with caffeine. I know that sounds ridiculous, but it totally happens, more than it should. All right, slide 43, digestive enzymes. Move into the circulatory and lymphatic system. Are they the only systems that it moves into, or is it in others? Oh, yeah, it's absolutely in others. As a matter of fact, we did a lab on this. The first digestive enzyme that food is exposed to is in your mouth. So you've got an enzyme that is available, that is put out through your salivary glands, called amylase, and it starts breaking down sugar and carbohydrates like as soon as you start chewing. So you've got them all through your digestive system as well. There are, there are a number of different types of enzymes, hundreds of different types of enzymes floating around your body, but in this case, we are talking mostly about the digestive ones anyway, and you've got different enzymes that are in effect at different portions of your digestion. So for example, you've got amylase in your mouth. You've got other enzymes, we won't go too far into it, in your stomach. You've got another set of enzymes that specifically help emulsify and break down lipids in your upper small intestine. So just keep that in mind. One of your classmates works in a coffee shop and says that I talk about specific effects of caffeine on our body. Notice that whenever I drink a cup of coffee that contains 2 shots, those are espresso shots, by the way, I seem to have energy at first, but right after I feel like I want to fall asleep and I get anxiety. Yes, that is part of it. So if I drank I don't drink much caffeine. I know you got, I don't even have it here. And this is what I have today. So there's caffeine, but I still don't drink a ton of caffeine. You saw me with my big pink cup that I came in with every day. That was like it was like my comfort coffee. Even though I had it with me, I probably only drink about a third of it. So if I were to drink something with 2 shots, I would be bouncing and doing cartwheels. I did it so that I could stay up overnight one time during a drive and hallucinated, because it does absolutely have all kinds of effects on you. Don't, just go to sleep. Again, go to sleep. Don't drive for 36 hours straight and stay awake on energy drinks and caffeine. Hint, hint, hint. So you will get a burst of energy at first because it literally absorbs straight into your cells. It literally absorbs right into your brain. And then afterwards, you know, you'll immediately get this energy drop. Generally, with the kind of things that this person is talking about, it is probably also a sugary drink. Maybe it's not, but often the coffee shops have, you know, all these drinks with sugars in them, and that at the same time will cause your glucose to rise, and then it will crash really quickly. If you recall when we talked about that. Anxiety can also be caused just because your blood pressure is up, your heart rate is up, that feeling where you just like are uncomfortable in your own skin and need to move is all a result of the caffeine literally affecting you almost immediately and almost all at once. So keep that in mind. This person also asked if it's better to avoid caffeine altogether and just drink decaf. It depends on you. Plenty of people function just fine without caffeine. I think that the world would not hurt without caffeine. It would if we suddenly didn't have caffeine, but it absolutely can be done. When it comes to drinking decaf, that's totally up to you. I personally don't like coffee enough that I would drink decaf if it did not. If coffee doesn't have caffeine in it, I lose the purpose for drinking coffee. But that is just me. If you can go without caffeine, do it. It's an addictive substance. If you can do without it, do without it. All right. So I have a question about the endosymbiosis of mitochondria. I would love to talk more with you guys about this because it is a really cool topic, but I'd like to try and stick with the sort of things that you would concern yourself with on an exam because you've got enough stuff going on for you right now. This person asked how it happens, if it engulfed it, wouldn't it consume it, how did they make a symbiotic relationship? Those are fabulous questions, and I absolutely encourage those kind of questions. They would make for a very interesting discussion, but in the format that we're in, I don't want to give extra to you that you don't need. So I am not at this time going to answer it. If you're super curious, send me an email and I'll send you a couple links. Okay. Bulk transport. Someone said, talking about the movement of molecules, does bulk transport require energy? So if you're talking about like pino or phagocytosis, most of the time, how do I want to answer this? I am going to type you an answer to this because it's a little bit complicated, and I am really afraid that if I say what I'm thinking at this very moment without figuring out how I want to say it, I am going to get very confusing. So put a pin in that. You will not see that on your exam, but please, to the person who asked me that question, keep an eye on your discussion. I will send you a discussion answer to that, but for those of you that are not curious about it, do not worry about it for your exam. There are a couple of different components that do and a couple that don't, so don't worry about that right now. With energy drinks having all added vitamins and minerals, could they be considered healthy or not, and why? So this is really about balance, right? So when you're talking about nutrition, when you're talking about animal nutrition in general, Um, a little bit, you need so many things in your body, so many different vitamins and minerals that you only need minuscule amounts of. You know, I am a huge proponent when it comes to nutrition of living in a gray zone. Those extreme black and whites where you never, ever, ever touch a carbohydrate, or you eat absolutely nothing but, beef and bacon. I am not for either one of those, or things like it. As a matter of fact, we're omnivores. So we need a varied diet. We need a number of different things, barring any allergies or anything like that. We need variance in our diet, which is also one of the reasons that vegetarians and vegans specifically really have to understand nutrition, and they really have to understand it well, because a lot of those B vitamins that your body needs comes from meat products. You can also get them from, most of them, from vegetables or other things that are not necessarily a meat product, but you really need to know what you're doing. A lot of people that want to be vegetarian or they want to be vegan, not necessarily for dietary purposes, but because they're worried about animal cruelty that goes along with it. A lot of them don't necessarily do the research that they need to make sure that they are getting a properly balanced diet, and that's when it gets a little scary. So now, with that being said, in that gray zone, could energy drinks be healthy? Other than the caffeine, if you were to take the caffeine out, yeah, there could be a place for that in your diet, like a supplement, like a vitamin. If you take a daily vitamin, that in general, with no other health issues to be concerned of, is considered a fairly healthy thing to do. But just like extreme diets, and just like having, like I mentioned, having to make sure that you've got a number of different things that you are exposed to, since we have developed as omnivores, our teeth tell us that. It would also, you couldn't just live on like 30 energy drinks a day with or without caffeine, because you need a lot more than what they have in them. As they stand, no, it's not worth the amount of caffeine that you're getting into you. However, you are still getting some vitamins and minerals that are not necessarily detrimental. So I know it sounds like I danced around that, but let me cut it short. Live in the gray. The caffeine levels do not necessarily outweigh the benefits, or do outweigh the benefits in an energy drink. So if you could take the caffeine out, energy drinks would be pretty decent for you, just like a daily vitamin would. Okay. Let's see, question 14. Active transport requires some sort of energy source to function, and that it usually uses ATP. When it is not using ATP, where does it pull the source from? Okay, so active transport requires ATP. There are types of transport where you can use the natural diffusion gradient of one molecule to propel another molecule that does not necessarily take ATP. However, in order for it to be classified as active transport, it uses ATP. So I would go back and look at the different types of passive transport so that you can sort of understand what's happening there. And with passive transport, it almost always has to do with the concentration gradient. If you're moving something against its gradient, you need energy to do it, and that always comes from ATP. Okay, another question about caffeine. Some people, caffeine doesn't affect, again, because they may already get so much caffeine that they just need so much for it to have an effect. They might not be as sensitive to it, or they just might not realize that their heart rate or their blood pressure has increased. Caffeine is very addictive. We talked about that, but this person asked, why is it really addictive to some people and not at all others? Some people have more addictive tendencies That's really what it comes down to. You know, there are some people that they put down their coffee and they wake up in the morning with a headache, and then there could be a daily coffee drinker that, you know, drinks a cup or two a day and then one day puts it down and they're fine. So there's a lot of variables that play into that. Again, yay biology. Okay. Small intestine, slide 36, how there are villi on the surface that absorb nutrients. Is there a certain substance in energy drinks, caffeine, or medication that could cause a damage to the lining? Yes. There are many such substances that could damage the lining of your small intestine. If there are so many that we will not go into what they are. I just highly recommend that when it comes to taking medications, you take them per doctor recommendation. Some of them need to be taken with milk, or some of them need to be taken with food for, you know, reasons such as this. There are other reasons too, but that's just an example. When it comes to substance and energy drinks and caffeine that cause a damage to the lining, caffeine can cause a damage to enough of it to your stomach lining. I don't know, honestly, how much is it the caffeine versus maybe what is carrying it, but often drinks that are high in caffeine also tend to be very acidic, which if you drink enough of an acidic fluid, you can wind up with an alteration of both the bacteria and to some extent you affect your stomach lining because you alter the pH around your stomach lining or the lining of your intestines. You do that long enough, you could wind up with ulcers. So in that, I would say it's not really even the substance as the pH change when it comes to really acidic things that tend to have caffeine in them. Nothing other than that I would think of in an energy drink that could damage, on a normal person, would damage the lining to the stomach or the intestine. Someone asked about caffeine and its addictive nature. Is it similar to things like tea and chocolate? Yes. Caffeine is caffeine is caffeine. Wherever you get it from, your body, if you are addicted to it, needs a certain amount of milligrams a day, or you may experience withdrawals. Doesn't matter where it comes from. So you might not be a coffee drinker, but you might be a chocoholic. It's not just the wonderful taste of chocolate that keeps people coming back. Caffeine plays a role in that. Again, I think I answered this question. Why do people say energy drinks are bad if they have vitamins, minerals, food additives, and stimulants? It's because of the stimulants. Caffeine, again, we come back to that. I talked about the FDA. Why aren't they FDA approved? That, I think I covered that pretty well. Caffeine and B vitamins on slide 25 are more likely than the energy blend to contribute to an energy drink effectiveness. So does this mean that the other ingredients in the blend are useless, or do they just cause negative effects to your body? No, they're not useless. As a matter of fact, there are other ingredients that certainly won't hurt you and may even actually benefit you. For example, taurine. A lot of these energy drinks have taurine. Interesting Jeopardy fact, since I told you guys I would prepare you for Jeopardy. Taurine is the main ingredient in Red Bull. Taurine is also found in the highest concentration in bull's blood. So there you go. Red Bull, high concentration of taurine. That is where the name came from. But no, there's plenty of things in energy drinks that can be very beneficial to you. And are not useless at all, and they don't really cause a negative effect if you don't have, you know, some kind of underlying medical issue. But I think I mentioned in the video that I made for you, the PowerPoints, I talked specifically about why B vitamins are believed to play a role in that alertness that is caused by energy drinks. If you have any more questions about that, let me know. But I talked about what happens if you don't have enough vitamin B of different types in your diet. All right. Let's see. All right, so here's a big question. Entropy occurs when there is a lack of organization in the cell and energy is not constantly absorbed and used for the cells to function. So if a cell loses function and stops taking in energy and goes into entropy, what is the worst thing that happened? The cell dies. The cell needs to be moving things in and out of its membrane constantly. The surface of that phospholipid membrane, that phospholipid bilayer, it is just covered with all of this stuff, and there are things constantly moving across it, being transported in and out of it, literally cilia that kind of pass things along. Like, it is like a super highway. There's all kinds of stuff going on there. Things need to move. So if they are not moving, what is most likely going to happen is you are going to have cell death. So now I tried to put exactly what you were saying about this question here, because we talked about entropy, and in the PowerPoint I mentioned the clean room versus the messy room, and I'm trying to tie in what you're saying about, I feel like you're asking something about homeostasis, so I'm bringing this up now, and I'm bringing it up to everyone because I'd like some, maybe somebody can tell me exactly, like specify a little bit more what they're asking here so that I can answer this question. But the quick answer, like answer the question specifically, but the real quick answer is that if a cell stops moving things across its membrane, the cell doesn't exist anymore. So that's like the real quick answer to that. Let's see. When we talk about organic nutrients, why are organic foods better than the regular one? They're not. I'm going to try not to go on too much of a tangent with this, but they're absolutely not. Really trying to control this. Okay. Organic foods give you the same amount of nutrients as a non-organic food. The only thing that I could see that could potentially be a difference is the use of pesticides on the plants while the plants are growing. However, many organic farmers do use pesticides. They're just different types. Without me going really far into it, if you are really into the whole organic food thing, please look into what the regulations actually are from the USDA on those things. Because when you're buying organic food from a large-scale company, there's more to it than just saying, hey, we don't use pesticides, because they do. This is where that topic of what is a pesticide and how can you dance around the law kind of comes into play. I don't want to preach too much here because this, oh man, this would have been a great topic for that pseudoscience thing that you are doing. But just if you're really interested, take a look at the USDA requirements. The really huge farms can't possibly do what is in your head when you think organic farming. Because organic farming on a small farm is already super hard. You need to go around and literally pick off all the bugs that might be attacking your plants. Anyway, okay, I said I wouldn't get into a tangent. Go look it up. But I think I answered that question. I will try to leave it there. Next question, slide 19, energy nutrients have potential energy stored in their bonds. Does this mean specific nutrients always give you energy? And if you eat too much of something, you start to feel tired. Dude, I have that problem all the time. When I eat, I get tired. There are different reasons for this. I'll start at the back side of this question. Your body actually, when you eat a lot of food, and your body has to digest a lot of food, you actually will shunt a small amount of blood, which means you will pull a small amount of blood away from your limbs and from everywhere else to focus on processing everything through in digestion. That definitely plays a role in your energy levels. By the way, that whole thing about turkey and tryptophan, yes, tryptophan will make you sleepy, but not in the amount you will get from turkey. Usually what makes people tired is how much they ate on Thanksgiving, not that they had turkey when they did it. Okay, so the question about energy and bonds, carbohydrate, protein, fat, always give you energy. Always will give you energy. That is the macronutrient. Those are the macronutrients that do it. Vitamins and minerals have nothing to do with direct input of energy. They can help the process, they can bind to things, they can make it more efficient, but the only things that you can do to make energy is to eat carbohydrate, protein, and lipid. Okay. So while we are sort of on that topic, someone asked about the term brain food and that it's important to take in nutrients needed for your brain as well. My question is, taking too much of any type of nutrient, the macronutrients, needed to regulate our body, does it affect the brain or is it only affecting the body? That's a great question. Okay, so when you hear the term brain food, generally, what they're talking about are going to be proteins and healthy fatty acids. So many of you have heard the term omega-3 fatty acid. It has to do specifically with the structure of that triglyceride chain that makes it an omega-3 fatty acid. Omega-3 fatty acids are actually produced only by saltwater algae. Saltwater algae is eaten by small organisms. A larger organism eats that organism. It moves up the food chain and you wind up with things that we will actually eat that is very high in omega-3s like salmon. So yes, omega-3s are fabulous for your brain. Conversely, omega-6s, while it's a fatty acid that you can make use of, it has been shown to have negative effects like causing inflammation in your body. Of course, it would be a much larger amount, but or something you eat frequently, but it has shown negative effects. So where did I lose myself? Here we go. So that's just an example of brain food. Now, when it comes to taking into too much of any type of nutrient or too little of any type of nutrient, it absolutely will affect your brain by way of your body. So is it a direct effect on your brain? Maybe, for example, say like caffeine is that immediately gets into your system? Sometimes, but most of the time, what affects your body in some way, shape, or form, whether it be a deficiency or what's the word I'm looking for here? We will just say for the time being, if you have too much of something, what is affecting your body in one way, shape, or form will affect your brain. Those things are tied together, whether directly or indirectly. Your brain plays a role in absolutely everything that your body does. It is the computer, the data processing, it controls everything. So whatever you do to your body, you're sort of also doing to your brain. Okay. I answered the next question, the daily value of 1% in a Red Bull, and why isn't it regulated by the FDA? Because it's not considered a food until it has one of those 3 macronutrients at a particular percentage on the label. Again, another question about caffeine. Why are more people addicted to caffeine than others? Can it be in the genes or a learned behavior? There's a lot to be said about genetic science and how much we're learning constantly about it. I talked to you guys about, a literal change in the genes in the grandchildren of Holocaust survivors that actually help them store fat more efficiently. We also discussed exactly other ways that could potentially be affected, not just genetic changes. So there is, potential that that some people are less affected by caffeine than others. That doesn't mean not affected. It just means maybe there's something, some kind of trait where people are a little bit less or more affected by coffee. But generally, this is part of that nature versus nurture debate. And on the front of caffeine right now, where science sits, I would say more people would probably say that is more of a nurture thing, something that you learn from being around others or watching your parents do it. Okay. Someone said these energy drinks are supposed to be, some say they're better for you than the average energy drink and have extra vitamins and lots of B12, but sometimes when you drink it, you feel sick or lightheaded and have a headache. Is this a side effect of too much caffeine or a caffeine crash? I can't speak to like the energy drinks that say they're better than others. That's just, part of the competition that these companies have, the marketing competition, but it could be. But I can't speak to it. What I can say is that often that sick or lightheaded or headache feeling goes along with the caffeine. Whether it's an energy drink or you drink a ton of coffee, I talked about it a few minutes ago, same thing. All right, we're almost there, you guys. Let's see, slide 19, energy nutrients. Why do children and adults with ADHD seem to calm down and more focused on caffeine? Absolutely, they do. Caffeine sort of has the opposite effect on ADHD people. I only know a little bit about it. We will not get too far into it here. It is too easy to Google, and it is not going to be on your exam. But it is absolutely true. I have seen it happen over and over again. I have seen people that really, really struggle with ADHD be able to drink a cup of coffee and focus better. But there's lots of stuff out there on that, and it shouldn't be, there shouldn't be, without me looking, there shouldn't be a ton of garbage floating around that like is completely and totally off base on that. So that's an easy Google. Let's see. Carbohydrates can cause brain fog. People who consume a lot of carbs can experience symptoms of ADHD and ADD. I can't speak to that because that's not something I have heard. I have heard things about food colorings. I know about, omega-6s causing inflammation. I'm not saying that it doesn't exist. I just don't know a ton. I don't know enough about the treatment of ADD and ADHD to be able to answer that with confidence. Why do people make energy drinks seem like they don't have an effect on you? I have to be misunderstanding that question because that's how they sell them. That's how they market them, is that they will have an effect. So I feel like I'm misunderstanding. Why are some energy drinks classified as healthier than others if they have an effect on you during the long run? Again, that's part of that marketing thing. In this day and age, people are super sensitive as to what they think is healthy, and unfortunately, or what they've learned is healthy. And unfortunately, advertisers and marketing people are all about that. Like if they can sell people on something being healthier, especially if they can make claims like that and sort of fly under the radar for a while, they will definitely do that. Because if you have two energy drinks in front of you, and one says, high in blah, 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 which is good for your brain, and you like them both equally as much, you're probably going to take the one that says it's healthier, right? And the marketing guys know that. Okay. All right. So this person asked about, again, that Bang energy drink. I'm going to have to look into that. Took a drink and went to the gym, felt lightheaded, took a drink, continued to work out, had to stop again, might pass out if they continued any further, still dizzy and nauseated, didn't know why the drink made them feel this way. I can't answer that question. There are entirely too many other questions that I have. Like, about what you ate. Are you taking supplements? What's your hydration? That is, if it ever happens again, go see your doctor. I can't answer that via the internet. I can't even speculate via the internet because there's too many things that could have been. Slide 28, I talked about dipeptides and how they're very strong and take longer to digest and release energy. Does that mean it gives me more energy or I can have energy for longer? Protein, the complex structure of protein allows for more bonds to be formed, and each bond that is formed holds energy. So if you remember, the energy itself is stored in the bond. Additionally, when you're talking about protein, because you are talking about these long strands of these monomers, these amino acids, these peptides that make up a protein, it takes longer to digest, it takes longer to break down. Overall, that is much healthier for you than a simple carbohydrate because you want your body to release a steady amount of energy. You don't want the carbohydrate energy nearly as much where, especially the really simple sugars, there's not a ton of reason to have glucose in your diet. Your body just absorbs it too quick, your energy spikes, and then it tanks. Because these protein chains are so long, they take longer to break down. They take longer to absorb. They make you feel full longer. If you've ever had a bowl of rice versus if you've had a bowl of chicken, I don't know how many of y'all have done a lot of cheese food or Chinese food that has a lot of rice and noodles that goes with it, and you could eat until you're stuffed, and then an hour later you're like, oh, I'm hungry again. That's generally what it is. So because it takes longer to break everything down, you're not hungry as soon, you get more energy out of it just because of the amount of connections. While I am at that, I remember a question asking about dehydration synthesis. And it says, how does dehydration synthesis work to make amino acids? That is not how dehydration synthesis works. You have all the right words, but let's make sure that they are in the right order. So you have amino acids that are floating around, right? So we talked about RNA in the ribosome actually transcribing these protein chains, right? So in order to make a protein chain, you have these monomers, these individual amino acids. And what happens is that area, if the amino acids are sitting right next to one another, in order for them to bond together, in order for them to be held together to start building that chain, you have a dehydration reaction. So the water gets taken out of it. So you'll have, a hydrogen on one amino acid, and you'll have a hydrogen and an oxygen. You'll have a hydroxyl group and OH group on the other amino acid. And when they come together, water, H2O, gets formed, and it moves away, dehydrating those molecules and sticking them together. Hope that makes sense, and I hope that that answered both of your questions at the same time. Also, I had a question about leucine, isoleucine, and valine. How do they slow muscle fatigue? I would love to answer this question. I do not want to get into that topic. Email me. I would be glad to give you some references and have a discussion. It has been a long time since I've had a really good talk about amino acids in general. I don't feel like I get to go far enough into them in this course, which is also why I teach animal nutrition. If you're curious, join my course. Okay. Hey, I answered that question too. There's another question about dehydration synthesis. I hope I answered it a minute ago. All right, I have a question about heat, i.e. energy. Slides 5 to 7, when it defines energy and the person is eating an apple, is heat a product of the solar or chemical energy? The heat is actually the chemical energy, your metabolism. So when you eat something, your metabolism amps up. And when your metabolism is running high, what happens to your body? It gets warmer. So you could be in a 60-degree room, but when you get your energy up, when you get your metabolism amped, when you're running on a treadmill, what happens? You start to sweat. And you're sweating because you are producing more heat because your metabolism is higher. So when you're eating that apple, it is actually a chemical energy transfer, and your body only uses about 10% of the energy that you consume. All right. Uh, Again, I had a question about the 0.9 grams of protein in Red Bull. You guys are awesome. Like, that is a very good observation to make. It is not something that I stated in the slides, and I'm glad so many of you caught on to that so I can point it out. I answered all the questions. It took almost an hour. I figured it would take 30, so that tells me that whether or not I meant to, I went on tangents anyway. I'm sorry, I warned you guys that would happen with nutrition. Heads up, it's going to happen again with climate change. Hopefully I am managing to make this interesting for you and you're not just listening to a monotone lecture. And I really hope some of you are watching this to get your answers and help you prepare for your exams on Wednesday and Thursday this week. As always, if you have any questions whatsoever, shoot me an email or put it on the discussion board. But if it is a personal type of question, email it to me. If it's something you need an answer to right away, email it to me. I only check your discussion boards every couple of days. All right. In the meantime, you guys have a great afternoon, and I'll talk to you soon.